Welcome to Beekeeping Today Podcast, presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today Podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hive's protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Thanks, Sherry, and thank you, Global Patties. You know, each week we get to talk about how much we appreciate our sponsor support, and we know you'd rather we get right at talking about bees. However, our super sponsors are critical to help making all of this happen. From the transcripts to the hosting fees to the software, the hardware, the microphones, the recorders, my God, the list keeps going. They enable each episode. So with that, thanks to Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture's been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. We want to welcome back Hive Alive as an episode sponsor. Hive Alive is the number one liquid feed supplement for honeybees worldwide. You can find out more at your local beekeeping store or visit www.hivealivebees.com for more information. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is dedicated to protecting all pollinators. Listen to Kristen Trainer's 2 Million Blossoms, the podcast, at www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with a number 2, and you don't need the wwws. Available from your website or wherever you download your podcast. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. We're really, really happy you're here. We have a very special show today. Joining us on Beekeeping Today podcast, directly from the Honey Bee Obscura recording studio, is Dr. James Tew. Jim, welcome to Beekeeping Today.
Well, thank you for having me here. I feel honored to be at the big table.
It's just a different table. It's not the little table, the big table.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Kim, it's good seeing you there, sitting at the table as well.
Yeah, and it's good seeing Jim here with you, the three of us together. We all work for the same company, but we too seldom get together to have fun.
Yeah, I missed you guys this last weekend there at the Tri-County meeting in Worcester, Ohio. Was it Worcester, Ohio? I can't remember. I always get it wrong. Worcester or Worcester?
Yeah, it's Worcester. You got it.
Worcester.
You got it.
Yeah.
Worcester, Ohio.
Yeah.
I had a nice time. How about you, Kim?
Well, it's good seeing the folks from Better Bee and the folks from Global Patties, all the other people that were there. A lot of people were there. I haven't been to a big bee meeting in, a couple of years?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So it was nice being there, and we did some work with ABC, with Jerry from Bee Culture. So
That's good.
if you got to spend a day away from home, that's the place to spend it.
A lot of bee people there, a lot of enthusiasm.
That was my very first bee meeting I ever attended, was the Tri-County meeting. Way back in the way back days. Yeah, it was pretty big.
Jeff, very quickly, for the listeners who may not know, it's an Ohio meeting, and it's been going on for decades and decades. It was started by an old beekeeper sitting around a wood-burning stove with 4 or 5 other beekeepers. And now they routinely, for years and years, they've been having on the high side of 1,000 participants there at the campus of Ohio State University in Worcester, Ohio. So every year, I'm long retired, but I'll still put a plug in. Every year, first weekend in March, you're welcome to be there.
Yeah, it's a good end of winter gathering of beekeepers, and really kind of mirrors what we're doing here today. Is the end of winter, beginning of springtime. First Beekeeping Today podcast of March, and those are the things we want to talk about today. Is what should beekeepers be looking at? But first, before we get into that, we have a quick word from our friends at Strong Microbials, and then we'll be right back.
Hello, beekeepers. Your honeybees face a lot of challenges out there. Unbalanced food sources from monoculture crops, holding yards, drought, food shortages, antibiotics, pesticides, and pathogens like chalk brood. To overcome these challenges, your bees need the multiple bacteria that are in all nectars, pollens, and the environment. These bacteria aid honeybees' digestion and improve your honeybees' response and resilience to pesticides. Now you can help improve your honey colony health with a quick, easy, and safe-to-use product. Strong Microbial's Super DFM Honeybee uses naturally occurring bacteria to restore the healthy gut biome of your honeybees. Check them out today at www.strongmicrobials.com.
And while you're at the Strong Microbial site, make sure you click on and subscribe to The Hive, their regular newsletter full of interesting beekeeping facts and product information. Guys, we were just getting ready to talk about, this can be an exciting time for beekeepers, their first spring visit to their hives. What are they likely to find?
Sometimes exciting isn't quite the right word, Jeff.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little less than exciting, but probably most people have been at least poking around in the winter looking for dead bees in the snow and that sort of thing, and they got a feel for, is this hive alive or is this hive not alive anymore? And that's one of the first things that people are getting into is checking for dead outs, I think.
Yeah.
Right, Jim?
I completely agree with that for those of us in cold climates.
Yep. And a gross generalization would be the first thing you do is find those that aren't alive and find out why. What was the cause of them passing? And the ones that aren't dead is what do they need to get going, because it's March already and pretty soon it all hits the fan and you want them ready, healthy, willing, and able to do what they're going to do the rest of the season.
Yeah.
So what I start with is dead outs. That's the first thing I do is I find a dead out, and then I try and find out why. And there's a lot of good reasons. No,
there's a lot of bad reasons.
Yeah. If they're my bees, there's a lot of good reasons why they're dead.
But where Jim and I are, upper Northeast Ohio, it's winter, and it's going to be winter all week. And winter in and of itself doesn't kill colonies, but a lot of things that winter leads to does, and starvation is the top of the list, I think.
Just a quick plug. I did leave a blog page on late winter and dead outs and dealing with that on the Beekeeping Today podcast blog page with some pictures. Folks might want to reference that later. But I will challenge you, Kim, that I would think that Varroa and Varroa-associated disease is the number one cause of colony death this time of year, as opposed to starvation. Starvation being the close second.
Well, it's a tough problem to solve. If you go into the colony and you've got the two things I look for in a colony, a dead out, is the population.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got a lot of bees and a lot of honey, then my first thought goes to mites.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got a lot of bees and no honey, then you've got, then I start looking at, was food the problem? If you don't have hardly any bees and you've got a lot of honey, then my first thought goes to not enough bees going into winter. They couldn't spread the cluster out big enough to get to the honey. It's over there an inch and a half away on the edge of the frame.
Yeah. Jim?
I was thinking as Kim was talking, I'm always eager to blame Varroa. It's my go-to source. Yeah, I had Varroa issues and they died.
Well, that's my going excuse.
But starvation is right up there with it. We are working to help our bees survive the winter under conditions that they wouldn't choose for themselves in nature. So we need to supplement our procedure. We need to help themselves. And what Kim was talking about, controlling Varroa as much as possible, being sure that we have feed in the right place so that they can get to it, even though it's just an inch and a half away. Sometimes you can help, but in late winter, early spring, there's kind of limited in what you can do. So give it your best shot. Try to help these bees get to fruit bloom. Then they'll take off on their own.
The other thing that I look at, and believe it or not, I've found this to be somewhat beneficial, is if I've got a hive full of dead bees, I'm going to run a mite test on them and see what I can find. And I've found over the course of the past several years that dead out colonies have more mites this time of year than colonies that aren't dead out yet. So it kind of points you in the direction of, it's probably at least mites but it gives you a bigger picture. If you're looking at dead bees, what's it going to tell you? Well, it's going to tell you how many mites were on a half a cup of dead bees that fell to the bottom board.
We've quickly swerved off into the dead outs, and it's a very depressing subject, and it's often it used to be 10% of dead outs in the spring or so.
Right.
Now it's 40, 50, 60, 80%. What BIP reported last year was 40% winter loss.
Right. But every dead out is a lesson learned.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Something went wrong, and if you can pinpoint or at least get close to pinpointing why that colony didn't make it, that can teach you something so you don't do it again next year. And it might be mites, it might be food, it might be insulation, it might be, but nailing it down this year will at least give you some idea of what not to do next year or what to do better next year.
I think this is also good time to make sure you take good notes, whether your notes are on a computer or in a notebook, because I can't, next fall, when I'm thinking about what happened, what were my dead outs last 6 months before, 9 months before, I won't remember. So I think it's a good idea, good chance, a good opportunity, whatever your record keeping system is, to make sure you list what you find in each dead out and what you suspect, right?
And take a picture.
The picture's really handy. Yeah.
Well, I want to say, too, that I'm surprised we are spending this much time on this. It is a gloomy subject, but I think it serves a purpose because bees die all the time. Every season, we have bees die. Swarms don't make it. Colonies don't survive the winter. So no matter how much we may dislike it, dead bees is a way of beekeeping life. And what we do with them, how we determine why they died. Yes, I'll do everything I can to have it not happen next year, but it will, probably for different reasons. And then I will just keep keeping bees, doing the best you can, trying to keep my 60% alive.
I'd like to think that there's not an infinite number of reasons my colonies die.
Let's take this the next step. You've determined you have a dead out. What's the best course of action? It's beginning of March. You have a dead colony. Should a beekeeper sit there and painstakingly clean off each frame of dead bees and then put it back in the box? I mean, what's the process? What do you recommend for beekeepers?
Kim, go first, because you may or may not be using comb as long as I do. So you may have a different answer.
I probably do. And I'll just take this from the lesson learned. Once you've decided or you've got pictures or you've got data that you can determine why that colony died. Maybe they just flat ran out of food, or they flat ran out of bees, or there was mites, whatever. The first thing I do right at the top of my list is get rid of that black comb. When I'm taking this thing apart, I'm taking boxes off, and that black comb is out of here now. There is no way that can contribute to the health of a colony, in my opinion.
This is when I get rid of all the comb that I got from the person I bought the nuke from in the prior spring, because what they always give me as in a nuke is the darkest, rottenest, dirtiest comb frames I've ever seen. And I pull those right away. I'm sorry, that's just a personal interjection.
Well, I can tell that you had an emotional response to that. If you got something you want to say, just come out and say it.
No, I think I said it all.
Well, I knew Kim would go there. Kim and I have talked before. I I have intentions of doing what Kim does, but I just oftentimes it's still there. I'll pull the comb out, I'll put it to one side. This needs to be trashed. And then I'll pick up a swarm and you're in a hurry and there's that old comb. And I don't want to offend Kim or you, but I'll use this until I can get this swarm going and I'll take it back out. But overall, Kim, I do want to reassure you, I do cull combs. What do we do? When that dead out turns up, what am I going to do there? So I've got all these bees stuck in the cells. I got putrefying, rotting bees. Mold. It's a stinking, disgusting mess. And I bang, shake, do whatever I can take to get as many bees out. Do what Kim does. Is this comb too dark, too old, too soiled? Toss it, keep it. Try to select what can be used again. Try to select what can be fixed. Burn the rest.
Yeah, it's a nasty job. Hey, before we go much further, let's hear from our good friends at Hive Alive.
We welcome Hive Alive back as an episode sponsor. Hive Alive is the #1 liquid feed supplement for honeybees worldwide. It contains a unique blend of seaweed extracts, thyme, and lemongrass. Hive Alive has been proven to increase bee strength, produce more honey, improve bee gut health, and improve overwinter survival. Ask about Hive Alive and new Hive Alive fondant and pollen patty at your local beekeeping store, or visit the website usa.hivealivebees.com for more information.
Hey, thanks a lot, Hive Alive. Hey, everybody, make sure you add Hive Alive to your spring management feeding program. I know there's been a discussion on one of the listservs for beekeeping and disposal of frames with the plastic foundation. You shouldn't theoretically burn plastic foundation.
Yeah, it is. Well, we're doing some work on climate change. It's a contributor to that, if nothing else, the pollution that it causes. And I don't burn the plastic. I get rid of the wax. I don't use the wax either. But Jeff, let me go back a step and talk about that nuke you bought. There's some good ways to reduce, not eliminate, but reduce that problem. And the way that I found that works best for me is I take those frames from that nuke, I put them in a bottom box, I put a queen excluder on. No, I don't put a queen excluder on. I put a box on top with a comb of brood from another colony and honey up above, and that bees from that nuke will move up pretty fast. If there's any brood from the nuke, you move that up too. They'll move up pretty fast off those old raunchy combs. As soon as they're up there, you get rid of them. You get rid of that box. At least get rid of those combs, and that's right on the top of your list. It's not wait until let's see how they do. Let's do this afternoon.
When you install the nuke,
right?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Well, good advice. I will have opportunity to use it this spring.
But the next thing that comes up, of course, is the brighter side of this story. Is you take that cover off, or you walk up to that hive and you're looking at the front door, and there's bees coming in and out, and a couple of them got pollen, and they're jammed up on that entrance reducer. They can't get in and out fast enough, and you did something right.
Yeah, now, that's a good feeling as a beekeeper. When you can see them bringing in pollen and they're working, even on those sunny days when it's 46 degrees, they're in there bringing in pollen from hazelnuts or wherever the early pollen plants. That's a good feeling, isn't it?
It is. And the next thing to do is to get in there and say, okay, what are they going to need next week? It looks like they're doing things now, but I say this carefully because it's almost always true. I'm always looking at next week, not tomorrow, because they're a week ahead of me, almost always. So what are they going to be needing next week? And that's the first thing. And you mentioned one good thing is Global Patties. A protein supplement. Mm-hmm. If there's pollen coming in and you got more pollen than you need, that's one thing. Northeast Ohio. Yeah, I don't have more pollen coming in that I need until I got goldenrod most years. So I'm looking at.
Wait a minute, that comes in August, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, I'm just making sure.
He's thinking a week ahead. He warned you now. He's out there in front.
But I'd rather have have it and don't need it rather than need it and don't have it. And that's just always kind of a rule of thumb for me. I'd rather give them too much and have them ignore it. But then you've got, and I'll bring this back up to that dead out again. One of the things we didn't look at is small hive beetle. What role do they play in dead outs? You have small hive beetle, Jim, this year?
I do have small hive beetle. I don't have them at toxic levels, but I have them enough to say there's a small hive beetle. But I've not yet had them overrun colonies. Knock on wood, not too late.
Yep. Well, I haven't either, and I attribute it to the wonderful level of cement soil we have here in Northeast Ohio. It's clay, it's lake bottom clay, and it's as hard as a rock all summer long. So it helps us in terms of small hive beetle populations, but there's a lot of places that don't have that, and a small hive beetle population can be. And this time of year, if a lot of them overwintered, and sometimes that happens, and you don't have a big bee population yet, you could have a problem.
Yep.
I
don't want to say this because I don't want to jinx the Pacific Northwest beekeepers, but at least where we are in the Olympia area, I have not heard of any beekeeper talking about small hive beetle. It's just
don't jinx anything.
I know. I'm
because you've got the crazy hornet coming in there. So
maybe we could throw them in as a side. For the Asian giant hornet, we can say, well, we got small hive beetle. Maybe you want those instead. No, that won't work, huh?
No, it won't work. Jeff and Kim, there's a group of beekeepers here that I hope some are listening in that are thinking that they are well beyond all of this. If you're in a warm climate, you're Nashville, Tennessee south. I mean, you've already seen pollen flows coming in. I mean, you're well beyond this dead out cleanup thing. You're already having some concerns about early onset swarming, making splits and divides, and got some queen cells going already. So this seasonal slide across the country is really interesting. While some people are still cleaning up from winter, other people, by my standards, are already halfway through springtime.
Yeah.
Or even more than halfway. That's one of the reasons we have our regional beekeeper show every once in a while. It's to kind of compare and contrast. We've got Mark in North Carolina and people here in Ohio
Tracy.
and Colorado and then out on the West Coast. So you got to get a picture of the whole country at one time and the differences going on.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking with John Miller about prepping for the autumn pollination, and the bees there are just bursting at the seams to and be ready. You're right, Jim. That's a very valid point for those beekeepers in those areas. What did March look like to you down in Alabama?
Oh, we're already in South Alabama and North Florida. It never really was winter. It just kind of cooled down some. The biggest thing is all the rain everybody had all through the season and everything being flooded and washed away. But right now, things are already, pollen's been coming in already for 5 weeks or so on nice days. So the bees are incredibly good at finding the most picayune, smallest source of anything, water, nectar, pollen. They're really good at it. So you stand there and you watch those bees. That's why I'm bringing in pollen. And you have no idea. You think you know where it came from. But by now in March in the deep south, they're already well underway. Good brood patterns, full frames. They're pumped up. They're looking good. And beekeepers are thinking, this is going to be the year. This is going to be the year. This is going to be a great year. That's the time of the year to think that.
Of course, that's why we're able to get packages and nukes from down south now when we need them. When we're just starting to build, they've been building for 5-6 weeks, and they're looking to. I don't want them to swarm.
Well, we got to mention California too, because they've got weather just as beautiful as anything in the south. So I appreciate those people helping me replace my dead outs every year.
Yeah. Well, and as we've talked about before, that they're not only they help us, that's quite a business that's developed into quite a business for those beekeepers who are providing those pollination services, and for those beekeepers in the South, providing bees for other beekeepers is profitable now.
Yep,
the industry is moving in that direction, unfortunately. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the market if and when this tariff shakes out. That may work on the price of honey, but for now, yeah, Jim, I got another quick question for you. I'll move back up north again. And it's March, and you've got a colony that made it through. It's not real strong. You've got food in there. You got a queen that's laying. If you're looking right now in our part of Ohio, about how many frames with brood would you expect to see, or would you hope to see on a colony that's moderately to very healthy?
Oh, Kim, that's going to be a guess on my part. I would really love to see 2 frames. If I saw 3 frames, I'd be happy. And those, that's a patch of brood bigger than the palm of my hand on 3 frames or so.
You don't have Russians, do you?
No.
No, Russians. You're going to see less, in my experience. I have to sit back and wait. I got to wonder about the evolution of Russians. They're waiting. Boom, they explode.
Yeah.
But that waiting time drives me crazy. and I'm waiting. I'm watching bloom come and go. Another bloom come and go, and there's still, now she's starting, and then I come out there a day later, and I don't have enough room.
I'm still trying to accept what you just said about waiting driving you crazy, because in beekeeping, it's just one waiting event after another. You're always waiting for the nectar flow to start. You're waiting to see if they release that queen. You're waiting to see if the new queen began to lay. I mean, it's always do something and wait.
Yeah.
Is it not unlike gardening? I mean, I want to plant something, and the next day I want to see some results.
You want to be eating what you planted, right? Okay.
Well, hey, one of the other things that beekeepers are doing right now is they're assembling equipment. And who other than Better Bee to provide that equipment for you? Let's hear from them right now.
Better Bee is pleased to sponsor today's episode of Beekeeping Today podcast. For over 40 years, Better Bee has supplied beekeepers across the country with the tools, equipment, and knowledge needed to succeed. Because many Better Bee employees are beekeepers themselves, they understand your needs and challenges and are better prepared to answer your beekeeping questions. From their colorful catalog to their support of beekeeper educational activities, including this podcast, Better Bee truly lives up to their tagline of beekeepers serving beekeepers. See for yourself at betterbee.com.
Well, let's talk real briefly about beekeeping equipment in the springtime. As a beekeeper standing there in their garage or their shed or out in the bee yard looking at their equipment, how should they evaluate their existing equipment and plan for replacing anything?
Oh, Jeff, I hope that's going to be an opinionated person. What can you live with, Jeff? How much rot and decay can you live with?
That's right. Is it really just a matter of personal taste and what you want to see, or is there a functional or reason why you should discard a piece of equipment?
Normally, I will. This is going to be hard to answer, Jeff. I will use a piece of equipment until it's just really done. The corners are rotted out, so if you had to close that colony up to move it, or if you had to deal with robbing, there's just too many holes. There's too many cracks and crevices. We've already talked about the frames. They should go, fairly frequently. Mm-hmm. But that box probably will go about 7 years. But in reality, after 4 years, 5 years, it's going to be showing some wear.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to toss it when you just can't live with it anymore. If I may, a very short story.
Sure.
When I was a young beekeeper, I found an abandoned bee yard. I couldn't believe it. There must have been 25 or 30 of the most ragtag, unkept-looking beehives I'd ever seen. And I went straight to the local inspector and found the listed owner of that yard and contacted them, only to be told that those bees was fine, that yard was fine, and they would appreciate it if I'd stay out of their bee yard. So what I thought was an abandoned yard was another beekeeper's perspective of correctness and fineness. So when does someone discard equipment? When does someone just use a flatboard cover? When does someone lay a piece of galvanized tin for the telescoping cover? That's all your call. That's whoever you are and what you can live with. The bees will be surprisingly fine with any of it, so long as they're out of the weather.
I've got a rule of thumb for boxes. Frames, you know what I do with already, but I got a rule of thumb for boxes. I've been using 8-frame mediums forever. And an 8-frame medium box is not your biggest, strongest piece of equipment, beekeeping equipment you can have. You know, it's not a 10-frame deep. And when I look at an 8-frame medium, if I won't sit on it, it's too old, too weak, too useless to use. And that's kind of the way it goes. You know, if you sit on it and it kind of collapses on you, it's too old. So that's my rule of thumb. That's kind of how I look at a box.
So you give it the old sit test.
Well, actually, it's a foot test because sitting can hurt.
I don't think I've ever heard of. Have you got a fact sheet on that or something? You could send me to a URL.
Video, a YouTube video.
Kim Flotham's crush test of old equipment.
Actually, that'd be too bad we don't do TikToks. We could do some videos, little TikTok shorts with some music behind it.
Just loop that for us, would you? No flower boxes for this man, boy. He crushes his.
That's right. On the other hand, I've never had a hive collapse. I've never had a box break. I've never had a roof fall off, so I kind of look at that.
That's true.
Well, what about bottom boards? They take a lot of abuse, and they're sitting down in the muck and the mess, and often neglected. They collect all the moisture through the winter and summer. And what about replacing those in the springtime?
First of all, I don't know what I'm going to do, offend Kim or not, but I'll leave mine set to the 3/8 opening year round instead of flipping bottom boards to 3/4 and 3/8. So I always run the 3/8 opening, and then it's easier to keep mice out. And it's the same thing as the deeps that sit on it. Has it begun to rot out along the edges, and will the bottom board still stand the weight? Because otherwise, Kim's exactly right. If that colony acquires heavy weight during the season and it's sitting on a rotting, decaying bottom board, there's a surprisingly good chance that colony would at least lean and ultimately actually fall if the bottom board rots out from under it.
And
neither of you use screen bottom boards, is that correct, if I recall?
Correct. Well, I don't. I will tell you, you mentioned lean, and I've got a leaning problem right now that I can't get to for just a little bit yet. My hive stands are cement blocks with 4x4s on them, and I will make a hive stand big enough for 3 colonies and put 2 on it. That way, I've got an empty spot in the middle to put all my boxes when I'm working either colony. And I made this new hive stand last year, and it worked just fine. And with all the rain we've had this year, one side of those cement blocks is sinking down about 3 inches, and I got colonies that are looking at the ground instead of looking out right now.
Well, listen, both of you, I'm not one to really speak to the advertiser, but ironically, from one of our sponsors, I bought 2 of those communal hive stand racks. You have to pay for them. They're not free. And then I can get 3 or 4 bee colonies on each of those, and they're adjustable in height, so you can level them out. And this sounds like a flagrant commercial. And I suppose in a way it is an unintended commercial. But it's a nice-looking stand. And that has stopped mine from leaning nearly as badly when you have this heavy-duty, no-nonsense hive rack set up. It'll take 3 or 4 colonies.
That's really good. Trying to find, when setting up a yard, finding level spots or creating level spots is always troubling, because I guess it's in my warped mind of trying to find symmetry and everything. I want everything almost, I've never taken a level out to the bee yard, but boy, I sure look at it with a thumb trying to justify, make sure they're
I like
sitting
them
straight.
level too. I've done. It's too expensive to do routinely, but there's a leveling platform that goes beneath air conditioner devices that sit outside, and I paid $40 each for 2 of those. And then you drive that big plastic platform into the ground, set a beehive on it, and it has been remarkably level. But the problem is those things are not cheap, and they're heavy, and they're fairly hard to get.
Well, the problem, I've never had this problem before, too. So much rain that, of course, I've never had a hive stand in this location. But the rain we had this fall and winter was way more than anticipated, and it collected on one side of the cement block and not the other, and down they went. So new home next spring, or this spring.
Yeah. Kim and Jeff, I'd like to go back just a minute to those bottom boards. When you said, do I use screen bottom boards? I'm probably half and half. And I'm probably half and half because I use equipment so long sometimes. The bottom boards have been holding up, so they're still solid bottom boards. But then, screen bottom boards came in, and they're all the rage. Everybody was using those, and so I've got some screen bottom boards. But it's pros and cons. If I don't want to offend anybody, I'd probably just stay with solid bottom boards, mainly because I move beehives occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I want that solid, heavy-duty bottom board underneath there, and I don't want the tongue on my hand truck to push up through that wire grid underneath. But having said that, sometimes it's really convenient to see what the bees are doing. If you've just put on an old deep and the bees are cleaning it up, you can look at that detritus underneath the beehive and see what the bees are cleaning up, what's dropping out, what they're doing. So sometimes there's some interesting reasons for having the screen bottom boards. I'm probably pretty close to 50-50.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much where my opinion is, give or take. Can go either way.
Whatever you have close to hand.
Whatever you have that's close at hand that will help me get that swarm, that's the piece of equipment I want.
Well, back to the late winter, early spring check, and we want to take a look at the bees. And you talked about maybe having the queen who's working maybe at this point, maybe 2 or 3 frames with a palm size of brood on either side. At what temperature do you feel comfortable? What outside temperature do you feel comfortable opening in that colony? How deep do you go into a hive at that point?
Kim, you want to go?
I'm 60 degrees or above. I'll take a cover off. I'll look down. I may crack the top super and lift it up and just look, but I don't do anything in a hive until it's 60 or above. And then I'll look at it is how much wind do I have blowing. And if it's windy and 62, I probably will wait.
Jim?
I'm going to go with Kim mostly on that. I'd probably go in cooler. It needs to be a good reason. It shouldn't just be, I think I'll go out and torment my bees. There needs to be a good management reason for doing it. And I'd like to do it starting 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the morning. And I'd like to think that the rest of the day is going to be nice and the bees would have a chance to recover by 3 o'clock so they can cluster back up if they had to and be ready to go again. And in my backyard here, in my own yard. But there needs to be a reason. These bees need feeding, or these bees queen right, or there signs of mites or small hive beetle doing anything already.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with Kim. If the warmer it is, the better it is, but you don't always get those days.
No. Kim said 60-degree days, and I'm thinking, well, that's not going to be until June here. So, yeah, so that's good point. And so one last management question, because we're coming up on our time, is and maybe a short answer from both of you. When you're able to open up that hive and take a peek inside, what are the signs that you'll recognize that indicate perhaps the queen is starting to fail and needs to be replaced in the spring?
So, Jeff, help me out. When are we opening this colony?
Well, let's say at the beginning of April.
At the beginning of April, when you up to that colony, it's a nice day. The other colonies are flying. Everything looks good. This colony should be doing that too, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be an indication before I ever even take anything off that something's not right. And then if you take the top off and there are not bees around the inner cover handhold of any consequence, I mean, right away, you've got a sense, if you've been keeping bees 3 or 4 or 5 years, that based on the other 3 colonies that are here, this colony should be doing this too. Then I'm expecting to see something wrong with the queen when I get down into that brood nest, because I've already been warned that something's not the same as what the other colonies are showing.
Okay.
I think the only thing I could add to that, on a day like that, or that time of year, the first thing I do is I take a good deep whiff of what does this colony smell like. My face right down on the top bars, and the colonies that you were just talking about that got pollen coming in, bees coming and going, and the queen's doing good. They got a smell, and we did a program on Honey Bee Obscura on smells of colonies, and this is one of them. It's a good smell, and it's a pollen smell, it's a honey smell, and it's a bee smell, all kind of combined. And if you don't have that, you don't have nearly as much honey, and you don't have nearly as much pollen because they're not bringing any in.
That's right.
And to me, that's become a pretty good key in determining what's going on. Is that first deep whiff that I take. If it's good, it's spring, and if it's not, darn.
Kim, do you remember now? We did 2 episodes on colony smells.
We did.
We did the good smells, and we did one on the stink smells, because there's some smells a colony can put out that really warn you, with the various foul brood diseases or that something's not right. So you're right there too, boys. Sniffing a beehive, smelling that good spring day when apple blooms there. I mean, there's good smells and bad smells. You're right. You're right.
Yep.
That's a good point. Good point. All right, guys, we're coming up to the end of the show. So let's quick round table. What's had you captivated this week about honeybees?
Go ahead, Jim.
I've got to tell you straight up, this is the time of the year when I analyze the bees I've got left, and I try to decide how much of my money that I want to invest in replacement bees. So that's the place I'm in. Should I buy packages or should I buy splits? Can you buy splits, raise them out, get a queen, divide the split, be better than buying 2 packages with queens? So that's been tying me up. And this ties me up every year at this season of the year while I'm waiting for my replacement bees to come in.
Kim?
I guess I'm a little different. About a week ago, we had more snow than you can imagine. And I waited out there to take a look, and there wasn't dead bee one in the snow. Tell me why. And that's what I've been thinking about. Are there no bees out there? There were bees out there a little bit before this, but there weren't any. So it's going to have to be another few days before I get out there. And at the same time, we've had more, what's the word I want? Snow occurrences this year than in a long time. It's maybe since I've been here in Northeast Ohio. It's snowed more times and it's snowed more snow than I can remember. So I've been doing a lot of work with the effects of climate change on bees and beekeepers and beekeeping in parts of the country and parts of the world. And suddenly I'm looking at, is this what's going on in my bee yard? So I'm worried about what's going on out there. I won't know for a couple more days.
All right. Well, yeah, I can add to that in that you guys both know I like the combination of technology and the honeybees, and I've got more sensors and whatnot on my honeybees than I probably should. But this week got bit by the shutdown of the 3G network. I'm going back to my old beekeeping ways of having to go out and actually look at the bees instead of sit here at the desk and look at the monitors and sensors. And so I'm going to have to deal with the lack of 3G and whether I need to update that or how I'm going to do without technology in the next coming time. I don't know. It's going to be horrible. All right.
So I'm sitting here talking about squishing boxes, and you're talking about 3G technology. I guess that tells me where I'm at, isn't it?
Well, no, they all have their place, I guess.
Resisting moving to what, 5G? You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
I don't know. I got to go home and talk to the wife about how are we going to afford this upgrade. And she's going to say to me, yeah, I thought you were going to make money with bees.
If it gets to be too much, go crush a few boxes. That's what Kim does.
Well, that about wraps up for this episode. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let other beekeepers looking for a new podcast know what you like. You can get there directly from our website by clicking on reviews along the top of any web page. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued support of the Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at globalpatties.com. Thanks to Hive Alive for returning as sponsors of this episode. Check out their honeybee feed supplements at www.usa.hivealivebees.com. We want to thank Strong Microbials for their support of the podcast. Check out their probiotic line at www.strongmicrobials.com. And we want to thank Better Bee for being there as a supporter. Check out all of their great supplies at www.betterbee.com. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Hey, guys, anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, just one thing, Jeff. You mentioned the questions. You know, you go to the webpage, there's a link there that you can click. You don't have to go to any place. You just go to click on that link and you can ask us a question. And the other thing is there something in this show today you think that you'd like to share? Reach out, share it with people that you know that might benefit from some of this information.
Jim?
Well, from my perspective, I was a bit of a visitor here, so I'd like to say thanks to both of you for letting me come play. I had a nice time, and I'll go back to my Honey Bee Obscura sandbox now, and I'll play in that. So I'll be waiting to talk to Kim sometime later this week.
Sounds good. We enjoyed having you on the show, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining us, everybody.